Welcome to the PeakDay podcast, where we discuss fertility and natural family planning with our friends. Today's guests are John and Brooke Fisher. John and Brooke live in Colorado and have been married for almost 12 years. They have 4 boys, ages 2 through 10, and they enjoy a very active day-to-day lives. John works as a school district administrator, and Brooke is a speech-language pathologist, but her current full-time job is managing the house and the 4 boys, which she loves. They enjoy all sorts of outdoor activities with their kids. In their free time, they volunteer at their church for the marriage preparation program, mentoring engaged couples who are preparing to get married in the Catholic Church. Thank you, Brooke and John, for being with us on the PeakDay podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for the opportunity, Martha.
So let's start with Brooke. What was your journey with your fertility before you got married?
So my senior year of high school going into college, I had amenorrhea, which is not having menstrual cycles after having started them. I went to doctors whose quick fix for that was to just put me on birth control to induce periods. So that was just a complete Band-Aid approach. It didn't fix anything. When I learned more about birth control and the negative effects it could have, I said, I don't want to be on this. And so I got off of it, and the problem still wasn't solved. And so I got connected with a Creighton model practitioner that taught me the Creighton model system. Through that and doctors that knew about that system, I was put on progesterone, and I was also encouraged to gain some weight. And those things combined induced my cycles back. And it was pretty providential that around that same time I was getting pretty serious with John. So it was wonderful to have learned that before we got into marriage prep. So I had a foundation, and also so that I could tell him, that I was naturally having menstrual cycles.
Okay. Was that something that concerned you about, not having your cycle and, looking at getting married?
Right, very much, because I knew that I wanted children. And so that was a fear of mine that I wouldn't be able to, because I wasn't having those naturally. And I wanted to be able to tell John that it could be a possibility, So At one point when we were still just dating, I did have to tell him I wasn't totally sure, if I would be able to have kids. And thankfully, his response was just totally open to whatever I had to say, and he still loved me through it, and it wasn't a problem to him. But he wanted kids too, so we're very, very grateful that our story has worked out how that it has.
Did you take a marriage prep class? What was your experience with that?
I think our marriage prep class was a bit disappointing. At that point, we were really bought into the most of the teachings of the Catholic Church, and we trusted the church. And so we really wanted to learn more. And I just remember our marriage prep class being, parts of it were really great and parts of it were a bit disappointing. I think when the NFP conversation came up in our marriage prep class, we remember that the couples who were leading that retreat walked off to the side and a priest went up front. And there's nothing wrong with a priest teaching about NFP. I think what was challenging was that we wanted to hear from couples who used it. And the couples who were leading the retreat, we talked to them later and said, we'd love to hear from you. And they said, well, yeah, but we never used it. And so I think that was really disappointing and challenging for us, because we were curious about NFP and we had a lot of questions about NFP, but we didn't get an answer there.
Yeah, so we left that retreat just feeling kind of disheartened for ourselves, but also all the other couples that were receiving these retreats. And we thought we want to do it differently so that, couples have someone to talk to, because this could be a huge concern of theirs. So that really motivated us to once we had several years of marriage behind us, contribute to marriage preparation within the church.
What was that learning curve like for you, John? Was it like kind of
Uh,
overwhelming, or was it like I'm all in? What were you thinking?
yeah, so I think from a couple different standpoints. So from just a technical standpoint, it was a lot of information, and it was the Creighton model is complex, and there's a lot of science behind it, and so it was a bit overwhelming just because of the amount of information and the specificity and some of the detail, and obviously like just everything was new to me, right? And there wasn't as much new to Brooke, but everything was new to me. So,
Right, right.
so that was a learning curve.
John, when people say that NFP is just like Catholic birth control, how do you answer them?
That's a great question, and I think to preface that, I would just say that I think NFP was the last teaching of the Catholic Church that I was able to get fully on board with. It was the last. It was something that we trusted the church, but I didn't really get NFP. I didn't really understand the why behind it, but we trusted the church enough to follow the church's teachings, and over the years, I have slowly but definitely just become completely bought in. But I was hesitant at first, and because it's hard to understand the difference between using a natural family planning system and just using birth control. And I think the best analogy that I've heard that's really stuck with me has been, picture that you want to lose weight, and there's a couple different ways you can go about it. One way you could go about it is you could make a diet plan, and you can exercise really hard, and you can work really hard and track your calories, and over time you can lose weight.
And be self-disciplined about what you eat.
Right. And the other side is that you eat whatever you want, and then you throw it up. And I don't want to make light of eating disorders because I know that's a heavy cross for so many people. But just for the sake of the analogy, both ways achieve the same goal. You can lose weight both ways. But one of those ways, we would say is honorable and healthy and virtuous and good, and the other way I think we all recognize is disordered. I think even beyond that, even beyond just the goal of losing weight, there's a whole lot of other health benefits that come with diet and exercise and growing in virtue and discipline and all these other good things that come from that. And the same thing with the other way. There's a lot of health, problems that can come from doing things the other way. So I think that's the best analogy that I heard that helped me realize that there is a virtuous and good way to work with the design of the body that has even other benefits that we don't even think about, realize until years after using it, right? As opposed to working against the body, and so that's the analogy that we give to couples when we do marriage prep and we talk to them, because I think that's the best way I've found to understand it so far.
And has made sense to us even as we've used natural family planning for a long time now.
Right.
Have you had conversations with, like, maybe outside of marriage prep? Have you had conversations with other couples about natural family planning? And how do you let them know that even if it is maybe a little bit countercultural, that it's a good thing?
Most of the time when we're talking to couples about NFP, we do that in the context of our marriage prep conversations. We help lead marriage prep retreats, and then we also coach or mentor couples one-on-one. So we have lots and lots of opportunities to talk to people when they're just at that initial starting point, right? Just almost married.
And friends too.
Friends too. Yeah. But we just do it so much with these other couples too. I think the things we talk about, countercultural, yes, but culture's broken. Right. So I think that's one of the biggest things. Every couple we work with, when they're engaged, they all want a great marriage. They all want their marriage to thrive. They want a marriage that lasts forever. And so when we look around at the culture and say, oh, yes, this is countercultural, that's actually a selling point, because culture is broken and so many marriages are broken.
Yes.
So I think that's part of it. But I think, we talk about some of the benefits that we've found in our relationship, where it just, and then we can get more into that, but it's just how it really pulls us together,
right?
And helps improve our communication. And some of those things, I think, are not always present in the way that most couples live their relationships. And so, we point to the research on the number of marriages that stay together when they're using NFP and when they're not. And even that alone is enough to give people a second look. And I know everyone that we talk to, most people we talk to, I think, when they're engaged, they're hesitant and they have questions because it's not something that a lot of people know about. And it's not something, where a lot of people have lots of friends that are using it that they can talk to. I think a lot of people who are thinking about using NFP feel isolated and feel like they're the only ones on the planet who do it. It's not true, but unless you have that community around you, it's easy to feel that way.
Yeah.
But every time we bring it up, I think people are maybe hesitant and maybe curious, but definitely interested, just because of the potential to really, use that to build an incredibly strong relationship.
Yeah, they're very receptive to what we have to say. Just very engaged with, the ways that it has been a benefit to our marriage, and we don't sugarcoat anything. Yeah. We tell them the struggles, and we tell them what has been just absolutely wonderful about it. So it's been fun to share. Mention communication. We talk about everything. We don't keep anything back. If you can talk about a woman's biomarkers such as cervical mucus, then you can talk about anything. So, and it's monthly too. We have conversations monthly about where's our family at, how are we doing psychologically, how are we doing financially, how are we doing with our stress levels, how are we doing with sleep, how are you feeling, about what you're getting from me, as far as intimacy goes in various different ways. So yeah, communication, it forces you to be just very transparent with each other, which we have found to be critical.
Well, I think one of the other things too is, I do think that a lot of couples, when they think about intimacy, they default to just the bedroom. Like, that's intimacy. But there's a lot of intimacy to be found outside of just that, which you wouldn't necessarily explore as much if that's always on the table. And so I know, a lot of people are concerned when they think about NFP about times, short periods of abstinence every month. Those really aren't that big a deal. And what they force you to do is find other ways to love each other, which you might not look into as much if sex is always on the table. So I think that has been something that has really strengthened our relationship too. And then when you can come together, it's special and it's exciting and it's new and it just doesn't get old.
You were using natural family planning at the beginning of your marriage and going along well with that. And then did something change? And what's your journey been like since that change?
Well, yeah, I'll start us off. I think we've been using Creighton model since we got married. And it's always worked for us, but it's always been a little bit ambiguous because Brooke has continuous mucus, which just makes it more complicated. And so,
because with Creighton model, the only biomarker that you track is cervical mucus, and it changes throughout the month. But I had it consistently throughout the month, so a lot of the readings were ambiguous.
That put a lot of pressure on Brooke to make those readings just right and to make the decision just right. And if she didn't get something right, the stakes were high, right? The stakes were really high. And so we just decided at that point we needed to look into a couple of other biomarkers to increase our confidence in understanding exactly what was happening.
Okay. Yeah.
And we had heard of a couple other methods from friends that had been using them successfully to space pregnancies, to be able to give their family the time they needed. And we're really liking certain things about those methods. So we decided to explore the other options that we had been learning about through friends. And so we looked into the Marquette method,
Right.
And then we also learned through couple to couple league the symptothermal method. It was very exciting to me to know that there were methods that gave me a more cut and dry answer on what was going on in my cycle, because the continuous mucus was more of like qualitative data, and it was nice with the symptothermal temperature to get some quantitative data, and and also with the Marquette method, just more cut and dry, like you are fertile, or this is your peak time, or you have very low fertility or not. So
well, I think what was fascinating for us, so we use the PeakDay app, we've been charting through there, and what's been fascinating for us as we've learned these other methods is to see them all line up exactly.
That was my next question. I was wondering if they're like, are they
100%? And that's what's been so, I think, so interesting and so helpful is we see the temperature rise, and then we see the monitor say you're fertile, and then Brooke gets clarity. She's like, okay, I was in the mucus reading. She's like, okay, I was pretty sure, but that helps me know.
Right.
So anyway, it's been beautiful to see those line up, and
and
this, I don't know, it's been really, really helpful. It was a learning curve. It definitely took us some time to learn those and to get comfortable. But once we got settled into those methods, it's been really helpful.
Sounded like it took a lot of time and patience, and probably some periods of abstinence, and those are all challenges. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Yeah,
for sure. I mean, we did have a more prolonged period of abstinence as we were learning, and it was postpartum for her, so so it made sense in a number of ways anyway. But it was challenging, and it took us some time to learn those methods and then to use them long enough that we felt confident with them. And,
before relying on them for natural family planning. So, we just fell back on abstinence to know for sure we wouldn't get pregnant with another baby during that time. And we just really learned thoroughly and made sure we had the monitors all working correctly through several cycles until we felt comfortable with it.
But I think it's like it's like anything that you learn, right? It feels uncomfortable at first. It feels overwhelming and a lot of information, and then after you do it a little bit, and you keep it just becomes a habit. That's just what you do, and that's where it is for us now. Like, we still have to talk about it, and we still look at the chart together and make decisions together, and we still have to check in once in a while. But it's just, I don't know. I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like the things that you do mostly have just become a habit.
John, what is the role of the husband in a couple's shared fertility?
A lot of it naturally falls on her.
Sure.
But I think, in order to really be a partner, and if this is the system that we are going to choose to use, it's my job to understand that system just as well as she does. It's my job to learn it with her, to help her just think about the details. And then I feel really strongly about, like, since we've started NFP, when we first got married, that anytime we're making a decision, we make it together.
Right.
Because I think that's what I would not want to have happen is we have something unexpected happen, and then there's resentment. Oh, well, you didn't do this, or you dropped the ball, or you didn't check, or you weren't careful.
Right.
I don't want that in our marriage. And so anytime we have to make a decision about fertility, we make it together. We lay the information out, we talk together, and then we both agree. We both feel good about where we're at, and we're both going to own whatever we decide.
Yeah.
How is your faith playing a role in how you are planning your family, and has it been strengthened or challenged during this maybe period of struggle?
It's a good question, because I think we talk about NFP, but there's a couple different components to that, right? One is the system and the logistics and all the actions, but the other is the mindset of being open to having children. And I think from the standpoint of our Catholic faith, we could use it as birth control very effectively because it's a system that works for us. And so if we don't also have a trust in our Lord and an openness to children and to a family life, then we could use it for you. So I think the last few months, I think for us, or last year or so, I guess, a couple of years, what we've had to think about a lot more is what does it mean to have a serious reason to avoid pregnancy?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what our church teaches us is, it's okay to space first, but you have to have a serious reason. And so what is that? Like, what does that mean? And I think that's something that I think we need to talk a lot more about as Catholics about, because this is a difficult decision for families.
Mm-hmm.
And,
and it's not one that's necessarily done. Like at this moment,
right.
We feel strongly that we are not ready to have another child.
Mm-hmm.
And we have felt that for the last 2 years. But we know that has potential to change. And so, everyone wants to know, are you going to have more kids?
Yeah.
And at the moment, no.
We're not talking about it.
But right now, makes all the difference because, that could change. And later on, God might be calling us to have another baby. Mm-hmm. So, we've really had to take the deep dive into conversations about what does constitute a serious reason for delaying another pregnancy. We've had lots of different reasons over the last decade in between our kids, and then now why we've postponed between children. After our second, we had just moved, both new jobs, new house,
Mm-hmm.
didn't know anybody in our new town.
Mm-hmm.
I just had a really hard time postpartum. And my mental health was not ready for another child for a few years, actually. So we have a larger gap between our second and our third for that reason. And through prayer and discussion, we really did feel like that was a heavy enough reason to delay another pregnancy.
Yeah. Parenting is challenging, so stress level and mental health and sleep and how's our marriage doing and all these things. I mean, these are really important things to consider. And it's not like, obviously, if we were like, well, let's not have another child because I want to save up money for a Lamborghini, right? Like, that's not a serious reason.
Or a Disney vacation or whatever,
But, when we see that, like, everything in our life is kind of on hold. We're not taking on extra volunteering. We're not taking on extra responsibilities anywhere else because we're kind of we're feeling pushed to our limits in some of these certain areas and stress level things. And it's like, okay, that needs to help us. We need to reconsider. We need to think. And then as that burden lifts and we feel that burden lift a bit, then I think it's easier to jump back in the conversation. But the other component of that is that our capacity grows too. And so what would have, 10 years ago made us feel like we were totally overwhelmed is different now because we have a bigger capacity in parenting and, more stability in a lot of ways. So I think there's so many factors, but yes, it has brought us back to that conversation, with each other and with our Lord every month about where we at and what does God have in store for us.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that is another beautiful aspect of natural family planning because you are having those discussions. And, when you do take the CCL class, we do talk about that responsible parenthood. And, where else would you hear about that maybe if not in a natural family planning class? So it's a beautiful teaching of the church. How has it been, being more aware of your cycle health? How important has that been to your overall health?
Well, originally, whenever I learned it before we were engaged, they discovered that I had low progesterone. And interestingly, after we got married, about 6 months into our marriage, we discovered that we were pregnant, and we ended up losing the baby 8 weeks later. And they were able to see in my chart that I was very low progesterone, and that's likely what caused the miscarriage. So both the health of myself and then the health of our children too, that was huge because then as soon as we were pregnant again, the doctors put me on progesterone immediately. And
Okay.
so since then, we've been able to carry every baby to term.
Mm.
And we, yeah, are obviously so grateful because we
Yeah.
have these 4 beautiful boys. And yeah, and I
Yeah.
don't know if we would if we hadn't
Yeah.
learned about that.
So, what would you say to somebody who maybe has irregular cycles or maybe has, health issues? Uh, would you say that, NFP could work in their case? What would you say to them?
I think if you have irregular cycles, it's even more of a reason to use natural family planning because it's going to teach you what's going on with your body. If there is some, um, you know, underlying cause of that, it's important to know in case it could affect other things, especially your fertility. A lot of times it can affect your fertility, and the only way you're going to find out is through charting and talking to doctors
Mhm.
about what is shown through your chart.
Mm.
Um, and as far as the difficulty of using different methods, that's why it's been wonderful to learn several different kinds because it can change depending on just what state of life you're in.
Right.
And, if you have very irregular like sleep patterns, then, maybe using an armband rather than having to wake up at a certain time to take your temperature is important, or maybe it's easier for you to test your urine with a test stick.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think it's completely wonderful and possible, and you should, no matter what kind of cycle you experience. Yeah.
You had mentioned at the beginning that because of what you experienced during your marriage prep, you had that desire to, make marriage prep better for other couples. So you now share your fertility journey with engaged couples during their marriage prep. So what does that look like, and how do you incorporate NFP in that talk?
Our church leads a retreat for engaged couples, every I don't know, twice a year maybe, and we've had a part in that retreat every year for the last several years. And the part that we have is not NFP. The part that we have is communication and love languages and some other things like that. But we still always find a way to talk about it. We find a little way, a little excuse we can use to talk about it. And part of that is just because we know, like we said earlier, like we know people are hesitant. We know it seems daunting, and in some cases it seems like why would we do that? Like people don't understand the reasoning behind it, and how could you unless you really have learned about it? Um, so we always like to give that plug and just say, I can say I was hesitant at first, but I think we can both say confidently that even if, and I think Brooke says this every time, like even if the church had nothing to say about this, knowing what we know now, we would still do it because it's been so good for our relationship. It's been so good for our marriage. It's had so many subtle benefits that we would definitely do that.
Yeah. What would you say the benefits of using NFP in marriage would be for our culture?
Well, I think to answer this, we'd want to make the distinction between, the system of NFP and the mindset of NFP, because I think there's benefits in both,
Mm-hmm.
but I think they're different.
Yeah.
So
We've talked some on the system
yeah,
of natural family planning and the
Yeah.
benefits that we've seen in our marriage, about the ebb and flow of just where you are in the month, and the type of intimacy that you can have during that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and just how that kind of continues to pull us back together closer and closer every month, after a little time away, and then we come. Yeah. So I think that's a huge benefit for us, and I think that would be a huge benefit for so many couples in our culture, where I think after so many years of marriage, they may lose interest in each other in some ways, and
Mm-hmm.
um, I just think there's so much pressure on couples to be exciting, but having a little time away every month is
Yeah.
so simple, but it's so powerful in the way that it draws you back together.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think that's huge. But in terms of the mindset, I think the mindset of NFP and the openness to children and the allowing God to play a role in the number of kids in the family. I mean, I can totally see that if we had not had that mindset, kind of influenced by the church, it would have been really easy after 2 kids to say we're done.
Yeah.
Because
Mhm.
man, they're a lot of work.
Yeah. It
And
changes
they're
your
wonderful.
life dramatically.
Totally. They're wonderful and we love them. But man, at that point,
Right.
I can see why so many couples who don't have a belief system, or even who do maybe, say they're done after 2 because it's hard work. But the fact that we were able to just not say we're done, but say we need a minute.
Enough to feel. But
Better,
yeah, I cannot imagine life without our 3rd and our 4th child. Like,
It's so much fun, and we have a big, loud family. I like to tell people, like, we have 4 kids, and at any given time, at least 7 of them are talking. Like, it's just, it's loud and it's crazy, but we love this life.
Yeah.
But we, like I said, we wouldn't have naturally gone there
Right.
without having that NFP mindset. So I think there's joy in big families or bigger families. There's really just no way to be selfish when you have 4 children, right? There's just no way to be selfish, and it's been so good for us. It's stretched us in the best possible ways, but I feel like our life is fuller and more beautiful now than it ever has been at any point in our lives.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for being on the PeakDay podcast.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us, Martha.